It's really hard to believe that it's been 2 years since the release of Episode 7, The Force Awakens. After the release of Revenge of the Sith, I thought there would never be another Star Wars film made ever again. And I still remember that fateful day in 2012 when it was announced that Disney was buying Lucasfilms. My mind started racing with all the different possibilities of how they can continue the original trilogy. And look at us now, 2 years removed from The Force Awakens, and we're less than a week away until The Last Jedi Episode 8. It's incredible. But I wanted to take some time out and go back and review The Force Awakens. It's a movie that I never got the chance to review, so I wanted to go back and revisit it since, the sequel is coming out in a couple of days, so why not? Star Wars The Force Awakens is probably the most polarizing movie that takes place within the Star Wars universe. What's the old saying? Nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. If you go on any Star Wars related YouTube video, you will find fans arguing over whether the movie was a successful return to form or an uninspired rehash that ruined their childhood. I didn't even know movies could ruin childhoods, but that's the new thing these days, okay? The Phantom Menace didn't ruin my childhood. I was Jar Jar Binks for Halloween, okay? I was 6. Give me a break. The initial response to The Force Awakens was overwhelmingly positive. I think people wanted to love this movie, understandably so. Regardless of your feelings about the prequels, I like them, but they were maligned by critics and fans alike, and for many, The Force Awakens was the first real Star Wars movie released since The Return of the Jedi. The overwhelming positive response became drowned out by the film's detractors, who claimed that The Force Awakens was nothing more than a soft reboot of A New Hope, the original Star Wars. The two films are very similar, but I would argue that The Force Awakens did a great job of reintroducing Star Wars to a new generation while also moving the story forward. That doesn't mean the film is without its flaws. It relies heavily on nostalgia, and the story's originality was compromised by playing it safe. People on both sides of the argument are reluctant to admit the truth about The Force Awakens, that it's not a great movie, and it's certainly not a bad movie. It's a good movie that happens to be titled Star Wars. When your movie is called Star Wars, everybody just loses their fucking minds. It's probably the biggest and most popular franchise of all time, so everybody just calm down. It was a good movie. There's some problems. There's some good things. Like most movies that come out of Hollywood, okay? So everybody chill the fuck out. The Force Awakens has a much stronger opening than it does a finale. The first act, to me, was the best part of the movie. It's everything we loved about the original Star Wars, and the third act is kind of everything we remembered. Starkiller Base, that's unforgivable.
It's another Death Star.
I wish that were the case, Major.
Several new characters and ideas about the Star Wars mythology are established throughout the first hour of the film, and the first scene features some of the darkest moments in the film, something that is usually left unseen in the Star Wars universe. We've always been told about the tyranny of the Empire, how ruthless they could be, but now we actually see how brutal the new First Order is. The stormtroopers are obedient killers rather than the goofy, ineffective foot soldiers that hit their heads on the ceiling.
Take over.
I mean, the scene ends with stormtroopers massacring a village. There's a stormtrooper with a fucking flamethrower. It's pretty awesome. In this first scene, we are introduced to 3 of the film's main characters, 3 original characters, Kylo Ren, Finn, and Poe Dameron. And we are also treated to a brief cameo by Swedish acting legend Max von Sydow, or Bloodraven. At 87 years of age, it was wishful thinking to expect a bigger role for the acting legend. How many of you thought he was Boba Fett? That was the big theory. Oh, Max von Sydow's Boba Fett. How did he even survive the Sarlacc pit? Whatever. His lack of screen time is forgivable, but Oscar Isaacs is not. Poe Dameron was one of the best new characters. He's introduced as a fun, intrepid, charismatic resistance pilot, and he quickly lightens up the mood with his back and forth with Kylo Ren.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first?
The old man gave it to you.
It's just very hard to understand you with all the
Search him.
apparatus.
He's described as the Han Solo of the new trilogy, but Han Solo didn't go missing for half the film 10 minutes into A New Hope. I mean, what the hell happened to the guy? After escaping the First Order ship with Finn, Poe insists that they return to Jakku and retrieve BB-8. But after they crash land on Jakku, he decides to return to the Resistance base without ever looking for BB-8, which allows Finn to basically take up Poe's mission and eventually join the Resistance. It makes no sense that Poe would risk his life in one scene to retrieve BB-8, and then he just decides decides to leave Jakku without ever searching the planet. This uncharacteristic decision by Poe was crafted by the writers to give Finn a reason to join the Resistance. Poe was actually supposed to die in the crash landing, but J.J. Abrams liked Oscar Isaac so much that they just kept him alive and reintroduced him later in the film. And this tracking shot during the battle at Maz Kanata's castle, it's one of my favorite moments in the film. It's so well directed. Overall, his character was underused, and I expect him to have a larger role in Episode 8. With the unfortunate passing of Carrie Fisher, I think Poe is going to be positioned as the new leader of the Resistance moving forward. Finn was probably my second favorite character introduced in The Force Awakens. He's funny, enthusiastic, a little goofy, but still capable of kicking ass. To me, Finn is the Han Solo for the next generation. The idea of his character is also unique to the Star Wars universe. It was the first time a stormtrooper was ever given a face, a personality, and a name that the audience can remember. The first sequence of the film gives us a glimpse into the life of a stormtrooper. The early death of one of Finn's comrades was an effective way of showing the trauma of being a stormtrooper. It's impossible not to enjoy Finn's comedic personality and youthful enthusiasm. Finn is basically like a kid who is experiencing Star Wars for the first time. Everything in the galaxy far, far away leaves him awestruck. He is constantly switching between extreme excitement and extreme terror. But either way, Finn is having a blast throughout the movie, which kinda doesn't make sense. Finn reveals his backstory to Rey, that he was taken from a family that he'll never know, and he was raised to do one thing. Personality-wise, he should be more like Grey Worm from Game of Thrones, a stoic, stern, focused killing machine with little to no emotions. Instead, he's kind of just an affable dope. I mean, he's definitely a capable fighter and a soldier, but the personality doesn't match the backstory. It's not really a criticism, it's just kind of an observation. And I don't know if a fish-out-of-water, overly serious soldier trying to discover who he really is what they were going for in the first movie. That's a little bit heavy for a Star Wars film. Maybe in one of the Rian Johnson movies, but not in the one right off the bat.
You don't know a thing about me. Where I'm from. What I've seen. You don't know the First Order like I do. They'll slaughter us. We all need to run.
The opening scene also features what I feel to be the best moment in the entire movie. Kylo Ren was my favorite addition to the Star Wars universe, and in this split second we get a glimpse of how powerful he really is. And then he gets defeated in single combat by an untrained, Force-sensitive scavenger, but whatever, we'll get to that. Kylo Ren's internal conflict between the light and dark sides of the Force is a familiar struggle. It's the same struggle that plagued his grandfather 50 years prior. Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side was brilliantly conceived, but poorly executed. The Force Awakens accomplishes in 2 hours what the prequels could not accomplish in 3 films. Why Kylo Ren truly descends to the dark side is a mystery that is yet to be solved, but it makes his descent that much more intriguing. I find the criticisms of Kylo Ren to be a bit unfair. He's been described as an immature brat who whines more than he fights. It's rare to see a blockbuster villain display more emotions than just anger and rage. Ren displays fear, confusion, love, and regret, all emotions that make him appear more human. Instead of just being a badass killing machine cloaked in a black cape with a red lightsaber, Ren is a vulnerable, conflicted human being. Many fans specifically criticize the moment where he takes off his helmet to confront Rey. I'll admit removing the cool helmet makes him appear less intimidating, but that's the point. Taking off the mask puts a non-threatening face to a villain that, up until this point, has been completely reckless and unforgiving in his pursuit of finding his uncle, Luke Skywalker. Kylo Ren's biggest fear is also exposed in this extremely awkward and tense interrogation of Rey. Kylo's resistance towards the light, the one thing that he is unable to conquer, makes him incapable of reading Rey's mind. Kylo losing this mental battle to Rey was the final push that he needed to fully embrace his dark side. The murder of Han Solo was just his final test. Han's death is not very subtle in its execution. The light being drained by Starkiller Base leaves Kylo consumed by darkness, but it is effective. And I don't know who is building these military bases, but I think building a catwalk over a giant gaping hole is never a good idea. When will these guys ever learn? What I also found very interesting was the relationship between Kylo Ren and General Hux. It kind of mirrors Darth Vader and Grand Moff Tarkin. The difference is that Vader and Tarkin were usually on the same page. They could even be considered friends. In The Force Awakens, it appears that Kylo Ren and Hux were competing for recognition by Supreme Leader Snoke. and I thought it was an interesting choice to introduce Snoke so early in this movie. Up until recently, Supreme Leader Snoke has been a mystery to fans, but now a lot of people are calling him a dud. I think like Maz Kanata with Rey, Snoke's role was to push Kylo Ren's arc forward. They really didn't have to introduce him this early in the trilogy. The Emperor doesn't appear until episode 5, and his first appearance is very brief. To call Snoke a disappointment, to me, is just ridiculous. The Force Awakens is not his movie. He's a puppet master. He's the man behind the curtain, pulling the strings of a future galactic civil war. I think that's why so many people thought he was Darth Plagueis. Darth Plagueis kind of plays a similar role during The Phantom Menace, assisting Palpatine in his rise to power, but to call him a dud, I think that's unfair. I think we have to wait and see what this character does. What's his full potential? Is he a Sith? Is he some type of new adversary that we haven't seen in the Star Wars universe? So give it some time, people, okay? Just because he's not Plagueis doesn't mean that he's a dud. And he still might be Plagueis.
If what you say about this girl is true, bring her to me.
The Force Awakens is a film that really belongs to both Kylo Ren and Rey, with Rey being the more polarizing of the two characters. Kylo Ren was polarizing, but Rey almost started a goddamn civil war between the nerds. Regardless of your feelings about the character, we can all agree that Daisy Ridley was a perfect casting choice. Daisy Ridley immediately finds her footing within the Star Wars universe, and her charismatic portrayal of Rey is even more impressive when you think about her lack of experience. This was her first major Hollywood movie. It's incredible. I really love the idea of Rey, a gritty, orphaned scavenger who is forced to fend for herself on this desolate desert planet. Sure, her origins are similar to Luke's on Tatooine, but the difference is that Rey has no one. No family, no friends. She doesn't say a single word for the first 5 minutes of her introduction, yet we fully understand her character and her circumstances. Rey's silence is a clever way to emphasize her isolation. Not really from the world, but from human relationships. I mean, Jakku does have a civilization, it has people, it's not necessarily Coruscant, but Rey doesn't seem to interact with any of them. Her reluctance to leave Jakku shows how truly alone she is. She can't even begin to contemplate the thought of leaving behind nothing, because she thinks that one day her family's going to return to her. Well, I'm sorry, Rey, Palpatine's never coming back, he's dead. What keeps Rey from being a great character is her inexplicable power. It's impossible to overlook how overpowered she is. Within a span of a few hours, she goes from a learning Padawan who just discovered her Force sensitivity to defeating a trained Force user in single combat who is shown to be one of the strongest characters we've ever seen. Nobody in Star Wars has ever stopped a blaster bolt in the air and held it for 2 minutes without even looking at it. He's not even focusing on it, and then he loses to Rey. It makes no sense. The development of the character was unnecessarily rushed, and I think the writers just got a little trigger happy. They wanted to make her so awesome and so cool that they forgot to make her vulnerable, and that's one of the most important aspects of any great hero. Most characters in Star Wars don't usually operate in that gray area. Who is good and who is bad is clear, but just because Rey's the good guy, that doesn't mean she should defeat the villain right away. She should have lost that lightsaber duel for the sake of telling a better story in Episode 8. It builds that character motivation similar to Luke in Empire Strikes Back. His loss in Episode 5 made his victory in Episode 6 that much sweeter. I mean, I just love it when he's beating down Darth Vader like, fuck you, fuck. A devastating loss not only enhances the audience's contempt for Kylo Ren, but it increases our appreciation for Rey as an imperfect hero. We've all been there, where we have tried to accomplish something, we failed, and then we come back stronger. Naturally, human beings will always gravitate towards the good guy, especially if he or she is an underdog. But Bo, what if she was secretly trained in the ways of the Force when she was a child? Well, they don't mention it in the film, so you can't expect me to assume things that justify your narrative. Rey's abilities didn't take me out of the movie when I first watched it, but in hindsight, I wish her powers were scaled back. I wouldn't go as far to call it lazy writing. I think the writers just got a little bit too ahead of themselves. But every new character introduced was solid. That's one of the best things that this movie has going for it. The character development was so well done. All these characters, you feel like you've known them for more than one movie. They feel like they're part of that original cast, and the idea of having co-protagonists with Rey and Kylo Ren, it's such a clever idea, because when you look at A New Hope, it's obviously a film that pits Luke against Darth Vader, but Darth Vader's only in the movie for about 13, 14, 15 minutes. Kylo Ren is in most of this movie. Poe and Finn did for The Force Awakens, it's kind of like what Luke and Han did in the original trilogy. They brought that youthful enthusiasm to the Star Wars universe that was kind of lacking in the prequels. You know, there's a lot of characters in the prequels that I like, but there's not a character that they introduced that I truly loved because they forgot to kind of give them personality. And Finn and Poe, these guys are just oozing with charisma and swagger, and they're just such great additions to the Star Wars universe. And I think that youthful enthusiasm inspired the OGs to really bring their A games.
Chewie, we're home.
In a time where Harrison Ford and Bruce Willis are competing for laziest performance in a sequel to a movie that made them famous, it was nice to see Harrison Ford embrace the Star Wars franchise after so many years. I don't know why he hates Star Wars so much. It kind of bothers me. But from his performance to even the marketing of the film, Harrison Ford actually appeared excited about this movie, as excited as Harrison Ford can be. Han Solo's relationship with Rey does mirror Luke and Obi-Wan's relationship in A New Hope, but Solo is more removed and skeptical. He reluctantly reunites with his wife Leia, and he joins the Resistance for one last mission. His relationship with Kylo Ren isn't explored as much as I would like it to be, but sometimes when you keep those things a mystery, it adds more to the character. We still don't know what made Kylo Ren fall to the dark side, why he decided to train with Snoke instead of Luke, but he references that Han Solo was kind of a disappointing father when he tells Rey, "Oh, you see Han Solo as a father figure. Well, he's going to disappoint you." So we don't know what role his parents played in his descent to the dark side. Leia mentions that it was Snoke that seduced him. That gap between episode 6 and episode 7 is still a mystery. We don't know specifically what happened, why Kylo Ren destroyed the new Jedi Order, what forced Luke to go into hiding, what happened between Luke and Kylo Ren. But the scene between Han Solo and Kylo Ren on the bridge is some of the best acting that Harrison Ford does in the movie. You can see that, parental love on full display. A parent is never going to abandon their child, no matter what they do. He helped destroy like 7 planets earlier in the movie, and Han Solo's like, "Listen, come back to us. Me and your mother, we can help reform you." And it feels like Han Solo. It does feel like an older, grizzled version of Han Solo. It doesn't feel like Harrison Ford going through the motions. Carrie Fisher returning as Leia, it was great to see all of them come back, but especially Carrie Fisher because her career wasn't necessarily derailed by Star Wars, but she has had the least success out of the 3. So it was great to see them bring back that character, embrace that character, allow her to be this old, grizzled general. She's no longer Princess Leia, she's General Leia. They say that she was going to have a bigger role in Episode 8, and we'll see if that comes to pass. And they say that Episode 9 that she was going to have an even bigger role. It's just unfortunate because you get to see an actress who made this character iconic. She's probably my favorite human character in the original trilogy. Yoda's my favorite character overall. You know, as a fan, you want to see this actress come back and see what she was going to do with the character moving forward. Her acting wasn't perfect in this movie, but it was good enough. The role is not that big, but she doesn't necessarily have a lot of screen time. And all the different characters from the original trilogy that appeared in this movie, it was nice to see. C-3PO, probably the funniest scene in the movie. Han Solo.
It is I, C-3PO. You probably don't recognize me because of the red arm.
Chewbacca, who kind of looks younger. I don't know how that works. I mean, Wookiees, what do they live, like 800 years? So, I mean, he looks good. Chewbacca has not aged a day. The biggest problem with this film overall is nostalgia, that it relied too heavily on the films that came before it. It's okay to be inspired by movies, to stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before you, especially if they're movies within your own franchise. But if you're going to craft new, creative characters that everybody loves, then you should give them an original story worthy of their introduction. The characters were so good that they could have taken a risk story-wise, and if it didn't work out, the audience would have forgave them because the characters were so likable. That's what Star Wars always was. A New Hope wasn't necessarily a revolutionary story. It's pretty basic, but we love the characters and the mythology, so we were drawn in. And that's really what they tried to do with this one. Let's just use the New Hope formula. They didn't have to play it safe. I still think it's an extremely enjoyable film, and a film that will hopefully act as a stepping stone to more unique and original stories with these characters moving forward. If The Last Jedi blows our minds, and expectations are high, I think people will look back more fondly on The Force Awakens as a solid first step into a larger universe. Hey guys, thanks for watching this review. If you're watching it, then you've probably agreed with everything I've said. I have that effect on people. People usually agree with me 100%. Just tell me in the comments how much you agree with me. How many days into The Last Jedi? I can't fucking believe it's here. Oh my god. It's Christmas.